One of the reasons I talk about the arts all the time and about culture is because, and one of the reasons I think that art can be so revelatory is precisely because art can't live in theory. If you create a story and the characters just represent your theories of life, people are going to go, these aren't real people. So once you start dealing with real people, theories tend to fall apart because it's the tree of life that's evergreen and theories that remain gray. And that's why I want to talk about what I think is one of the greatest Christian movies ever made, and the fact, and this will drive you crazy because it drives me crazy, it was made by some of the biggest leftists in Hollywood. And that's saying a lot. I'm talking about a movie called Dead Man Walking from the 90s. I pick on religious films a lot, and I don't really mean to pick on kind of the standard G-rated, everything turns out great religious films, because I think those are good movies. I think they're good family movies. I think they're movies that you can watch and they sort of, buck you up and all that stuff. But the great religious stories, the great Christian stories especially, are sometimes a lot darker. I've talked about the fact that my journey to Christ, which was a 35-year journey, really began with my reading Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, which is about an axe murderer and a hooker, So it's not the kind of book that you usually find when you go into a Christian bookstore. And so it's not that I want there to be fewer G-rated Christian movies, it's that I want there to be movies that are more complex, and this is one of them. And I found this film, the reason this film was important to me is back in the 90s, I was researching my novel, True Crime, which takes place on death row. A lot of it takes place on death row. So I was reading a lot of books about death row, and I read this book, Dead Man Walking, by Sister Helen, I believe her last name is Prejean, Sister Helen Prejean. And it's a true story about how she served as the spiritual counselor to two killers on death row. And she became an anti-death penalty activist. And she, too, I think, is kind of a leftist. She's kind of a social justice nun, one of these social justice Catholics. And Susan Sarandon got hold of the book, the actress, and also another leftist, and she didn't option it, she says. It was just a handshake deal with this nun. And eventually she basically browbeat her then boyfriend, Tim Robbins, into writing and directing the film of this, which is very different. It's a different story than the actual true story. But it had Sarandon playing Sister Prejean and Sean Penn starring as a fictional amalgam of the two characters in the book. There are two killers in the book that she is a spiritual counselor to, and Penn plays a sort of combination of both of those characters. So here you have Sarandon, lapsed Catholic, total socialist, complete member of like the Democratic Socialists of America. Tim Robbins supported Bernie Sanders, complete socialist. Sean Penn, he's just a whack job communist, supported Hugo Chavez. The only good thing I can say about Susan Sarandon is that back in the 80s, I guess, her kids went to the same fancy private school as my daughter went to, and I would see her. I even chatted with her. My wife chatted with her, too, at a parent meeting. She always showed up for the parent meetings. She was very nice as a person, and that impressed me. But there's one other thing that I have to say about all of these three socialists, these leftists, is that they're terrific artists. And you may not like that, but it's just the truth. Sarandon and Robbins are both tremendously talented actors. Sean Penn, at his peak, was one of the greatest actors I've seen on film. If you've never seen the film At Close Range, a gangster movie with Christopher Walken, unbelievable performance. And this performance is one of his best. The performance in Dead Man Walking is one of his best. He did not win the Oscar for it. He should have. I think maybe she did, but he didn't, but he should have. It was just an amazing, amazing performance. They made this to be an anti-death penalty film, like Sister Helen Prejean would have wanted. And I want to say that I do not come away from it having changed my mind. I've seen it before, and I watched it recently again. I do not come away from it having changed my mind. My feeling about the death penalty is that the death penalty in America is unjust and completely unforgivable. No matter what a person has done, you do not put him in prison for 5, 10, 20 years and then execute him for something he did all that time ago. I think that's tormenting the victim's family. I think it's tormenting him. I think it's cruel and unusual punishment. But I can imagine a just death penalty for certain kinds of heinous crimes. I can imagine a death penalty where you put a guy in prison for a year and you begin a process where he gets every chance to prove his innocence, and if he doesn't at the end of that year, he is put to death. I can imagine that being fair. So it didn't convince me to become an anti-death penalty. It doesn't work as propaganda. It does work it does work as a depiction of Christ acting in the world, in a world of tragedy and evil and cruelty by all the people involved. So how did this bunch of leftists create such a wonderful Christian movie? And I don't believe that I believe Christ is above politics. I believe he can love Democrats. I don't know how he can love Democrats, but apparently he can. I believe that he really is looking into our hearts and not into the way we vote. So I'm not saying that a leftist shouldn't be able to make it, but I don't think that's the movie they meant to make. I think they had to make it to get their point across. And they did it to some degree by the demand on artists that they be honest about the human condition. Penn's killer is so realistic. When I covered crime as a reporter, I met people just like this. There's a wonderful scene where the nun, Susan Sarandon, holds him to account as he tries to get out of the fact that he committed these horrible crimes. He's in prison on death row for having shot and raped a young girl, an innocent young girl, and killed both her and her boyfriend. This is cut 21, the scene between the two of them.
You have robbed these parents of so much, Matt. They have nothing in their lives but sorrow, no joy. That is what you have given them. What possessed you to be in the woods that night?
I told you I was thrown out of my head.
Now, don't blame the drugs. You were harassing couples for weeks before this happened, months. What was it?
What do you mean?
Did you look up to Vitello? Did you think he was cool? Did you want to impress him?
I don't know.
You could have just walked away.
Hey, he went psycho on me.
Don't blame him. You blame him. You blame the government. You blame drugs. You blame blacks. You blame the Percys. You blame the kids for being there. What about Matthew Poncelet? Where's he in this story? What, is he just an innocent? A victim?
I ain't no victim.
He doesn't want to see himself as a victim. She gets him that way. But the other thing they did was they let the parents of the dead children speak. And one of the dead children, and this was a big mistake that the nun and Sister Helen actually made in real life, that she didn't go to them right away. And they came to her and said, why are you talking to this murderer and not to us? And when she shows up, they assume that she has changed her mind and abandoned this guy. But they find out she hasn't. She's still the spiritual counselor of the person who killed their child. And this is the scene where the parents confront her. And it's a wonderful artistic scene because she comes off badly in it. It's cut 20.
I'm just trying to follow the example of Jesus, who said that every person is worth more than their worst act.
This is not a person. This is an animal. No, I take that back. Animals don't rape and murder their own kind. Matthew Poncelet is God's mistake. And you want to hold the poor murderer's hand? You want to be there to comfort him when he dies? There wasn't anybody in the woods that night to comfort Hope when those two animals pushed her face down into the wet grass.
I just want to help him take responsibility for what he did.
Does he admit to what he did? Is he sorry?
He says he didn't kill anybody.
Sister, you're in waters way over your head.
Don't know what it's like to carry a child in your womb and give birth and get up with a sick child in the middle of the night. You just say your prayers and get a good night's sleep, don't you?
My parents raised me to respect the religious. Sister, I think you need to leave this house right now.
That's an amazing scene. You know, it's a great scene because you feel their pain and you look at her face as she listens to them and realizes that she has not done the work of Christ. She has not reached out to both people. She has just kind of, it's almost a little bit of an ego thing that she has seen herself as being so open-minded to loving this killer, but not to them. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And they also changed in the true story. These killers were electrocuted, which is a horrific thing to watch. But in this, he's put to death by lethal injection. And Sarandon talks about this. Tim Robbins, who is the writer-director, he made that change. It's cut 25.
The idea was to take the combination of the worst possible person who is guilty and kill him the most humane way. The people that she sat with in her book were electrocuted, but Tim very brilliantly changed it to lethal injection because everyone thinks that's so humane.
Now, that's an amazing thing to have done, because now what she's saying is we took the worst possible person, killed him in the most humane way, and our argument is that even this is wrong. And they put that forward, and one of the things you come away with from this is not maybe that capital punishment is wrong per se, but you come away from it feeling that you've witnessed a tragedy, and you've witnessed Christ acting in a tragic world through a flawed woman who is not always doing the right thing. That's a very high bar to set, and that's the kind of high bar that artists set for themselves. It's not the kind of high bar that propagandists set for themselves. Propagandists basically say, we're going to make everything look like the way we want it to look like, but artists can't do that. Real artists can't do that. And so this is what you have this lunatic Sean Penn who sits around thinking that Hugo Chavez is a great guy. You have Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins voting for Bernie Sanders, a nutbag socialist, and yet their artistic talent demands that they speak the truth. And that is the thing that makes this a tremendous, tremendous film, and a tremendous Christian film. And they don't show Christianity as nice. The nuns are sweet, the nuns are nice, but really what they show them is joyful. And it's really one of the best things about the film is in the midst of this tragic circumstance, in the midst of this ugliness, the nuns are frequently giggling. Margot Martindale plays her kind of fellow nun. Margot Martindale, another spectacular artist. If you've ever seen Justified, she played a villainous hillbilly lady in that. And she is just amazing actress. So there's all this artistic talent bringing both the tragedy of the situation and the joy, this giggling joy of these nuns. My favorite scene in the thing is when she's preaching Jesus to him, and he does something that is so like these killers. It is so real to these killers that it's amazing, and she confronts him with it, and it shows the Christian love. Not that Christian love has its limits, but it does not lie in order to love, which is very different than the left, which wants us to lie. They say we're not telling the truth unless we're not being loving unless we lie, unless we say men and women are the same, or you can change your gender. But she shows you, no, you actually have to stand for the truth. This is this great scene between those 23.
You say you like rebels. What do you think Jesus was?
A rebel? He wasn't no rebel.
Sure he was. He was a dangerous man.
Oh, what's so dangerous about love your brother?
Because his love changed things. His love changed things. All those people nobody cared about, the prostitutes, beggars, the poor, they finally had somebody who respected them, loved them, made them realize their own worth. They had dignity, and they were becoming so powerful that the guys on the top got real nervous, and so they had to kill Jesus.
Kind of like me, huh?
Oh, man, not at all like you. Jesus changed the world with his love. You watched while 2 kids were murdered.
That's an amazing scene. It's an amazing scene because that's exactly what he would say, kind of like me. That's exactly what these guys say. Like he hears a romantic story about a guy who's put to death for being a rebel, and he thinks he's a rebel and he's being put to death, so he's like Jesus. And that wonderful look on her face when she says, not like you. He was killed for love. You were killed for murdering 2 people. So there's all this honesty that is coming through in this story. And the reason I'm talking about this is because we're entering this phase when Christianity is being demonized, and also when we're going to have to make the argument against abortion in the culture. We're going to have to make it politically, but we're going to have to make it in the culture. If we start turning out films in which having a baby solves all your problems, or getting pregnant is not so bad, or being raped by your uncle when you're 10 years old is just one of those things that happens and you just get through it. And believe me, we're totally capable of doing that. Some of our Christian filmmakers are totally capable of doing it. We are going to lose the argument as we have lost it every single time. Great movies, great Christian movies, great art, great Christian art, great true art, great American art. It's not made by great Americans. It's not made by great Christians. Both Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon are lapsed Catholics, I'm pretty sure. It's made by great artists. Great art is made by great artists, and great art is made, and great artists are people who love the arts. The arts are changed by people who love the arts. This has been my argument all along, that conservatives are so bad at the arts because we want the arts to look like conservative life, and they don't. They don't. The stories of Shakespeare are not stories of conservatives. The stories of Homer are not stories of conservatives. The great art is art about life, because life doesn't fit with our theories. Life is messy. Life is full of individuals who do different things, and when you turn that off and you say, that's too sexy, oh, you had a nude scene, oh, you had people cursing, you are turning off life, and you're turning off life, you're turning off art. Here's an example of Leftists making one of the great Christian movies, and we should follow that example. Man, that was great, wasn't it? You want more? Like and subscribe to the Andrew Klavan Podcast.